Today I'm doing a North African lentil soup, which is a great dish. Takes a little bit of time, so it's something you want to put together on the weekends, but then it stretches through the week, can go in the freezer, and it's really good. What I have here are the different kinds of lentils, or a couple of the different kinds of lentils. There are actually many, many different kinds. This is the traditional type that you see most often in the supermarket. Lentils are a nice legume in that they don't have to be soaked overnight. They don't take that long to cook, so they're a quick type of legume. This is the one I'm actually using today, which is a red lentil. It's a little bit different. We'll talk about it as we go. As you can see, it's called a red lentil. It's really orange, but when you cook it, it turns out yellow. So how it got its name, I'll never know. I'm going to start with about a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm going to cook this over, put it over a medium-high heat, get it a little bit warmed up, and then I'm going to add 2 onions that have been chopped up. Now the amount of chopping, because it's a soup, you want to get it chopped relatively finely. You don't want to leave it in big pieces because people don't want to find a great big piece in a soup. If you want to leave it and call it a stew, then you can leave the pieces a little bit larger. I'm also going to add 3 cloves of garlic that have been minced. Now you could grate them if you want. You can chop them down fairly finely. If you like the hint of garlic, but not actually the garlic itself, one of the things you can do is leave the garlic clove whole and then fish it out. The only thing is that you've got to remember to fish it out a little bit later. And then a teaspoon of grated ginger. And this is going to add a little bit of bite to this as well. Because we're adding the garlic and the ginger and the onions fairly early, they're going to have a chance to mellow out. The onions are going to sweeten, and they're not going to have any one of these flavors are going to be real pronounced because this is going to cook for a fairly long time. Now normally we would let this saute for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. We don't want it to brown, but we do want the onion to start to become translucent. I'm going to take a shortcut here and add a few of the other ingredients. I have about 2 cups of no salt added diced tomatoes, and I know some people in my family at least don't like the actual chunk of tomato in there. If you are working with that kind of a crew, I would recommend that you get either petite diced or crushed tomato. Go for the no salt added, either your own home canned or commercially, because we're trying to cut back on the amount of salt. That's something that's in the new dietary guidelines for Americans 2010. So we'll try and do that a little bit more focused as we go through the year with Oklahoma gardening as well. Also to this, I'm going to add about, it's about 1 carrot or a half a cup that we cut into relatively medium-sized dice, I guess. 3/4 of a cup of chopped carrot, or excuse me, that's celery. And then I'm going to add to this also 3 cups of water and 3 cups of a reduced sodium or low sodium as you can get, and as fat-free as you can get, chicken broth or vegetable broth. If you want this to be vegetarian, use a vegetable broth. You could use other types of broth as well. If you have turkey broth left from the holidays, or if you like beef broth, those could be used as an alternative too. Now the next thing we're going to add are the lentils themselves. Now with lentils, you want to make sure that, like all legumes, that you pick through them to look to make sure there aren't any little stones or chips that could do dental damage, and you don't need those in your intestinal tract either. So we're going to get those in there. That was a cup of red lentils. Now the red lentils actually cook even faster than the others. Regular lentils that you'll find in most markets around the state will cook in about 15 minutes. These can cook even at a more quick pace. I'm going to add about 2 cups of cannellini beans or white kidney beans. If you can't find those, use another type. Again, I'm using a no salt added version, and then the same with garbanzo beans. The advantage of using the canned versions is, of course, it's going to save some time, because either one of those beans is going to take a substantial length of time, and all the other ingredients are going to be well overcooked before you get to the point where they're ready to go. Now this is a North African lentil soup, and so we're going to add some flavorings that pull it over to that part of the country. First one I have here is cardamom. I'm trying to check and see how much I'm actually adding. A teaspoon of ground cardamom, Now this is a seasoning or a spice that you may not use very often, so you may want to work with your neighbor, maybe get one container and divide it out. That cuts your cost, and also remember that most, particularly ground spices, aren't going to be good for an extended period of time. You're going to want to rotate them out of your cupboard within 6 to 8 months, so sharing it with friends or family is a good idea. I'm also adding curry powder to this. This has got a lot of curry going in it. It's 2 teaspoons of curry powder. Again, we're going to cook it for a long time, so a lot of that's going to mellow out. The flavors are going to blend together, so even if you're not a big fan of curry, it's not going to have as much curry flavor as you might think. And then I think I've got a fourth of a teaspoon of cinnamon and a fourth to a half a teaspoon of salt. You may want to start with a 4th teaspoon at this point, and then when you get closer to being ready to serve it, see how it tastes then, and remember what you're serving it with. A lot of times with this kind of thing, we'll put it with cornbread, which may have a lot of sodium in it already because of the baking powder, or you may be serving it with rice. But remember how it's going to be at the final eating point, not just how it is at the different stages as you go. And then I'm going to add about a half teaspoon of pepper. I know that was a lot of ingredients, but that's all it's going to take. Then we're going to bring this up to a simmer and let it simmer for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to put a lid on it and let it cook until the lentils are actually done, which is going to take, 25 to 35 minutes. You may have noticed that the pot has changed, and that's because I did one part the way ahead at time. What I have here is now at your discretion whether or not you want to do this next step. If you like the soup that looks like this, which to be honest would be fine with me, then you're ready to go and ready to serve it. I'm going to see if I can fish out a couple of the lentils here so you can see the color change. There's a couple of them. Now, this is not because it had the curry on it. This is simply the color that they changed. Those started as those same red lentils. You notice they have increased in size, and they've also gone to that pretty golden color. What I'm going to do on this one, however, to make it a little bit smoother for those of you that like a creamier kind of soup, is try to ladle about a third of the soup or so. You can vary the amount that you actually do into a blender. I want to make sure I get plenty of the liquid in here too, so that it has something to work on. And then we're going to put it on the base, and we're just going to blend it for just puree it as much as you want to puree it, and then we're going to stir it back in here. So let's see how this will go. Okay, big noise at the start, but we got where we needed to be. And just stir it back in. Now, if you do this ahead of time enough, and notice it's not perfectly smooth, but we're stirring it into soup that's not perfectly smooth. If you do this early enough that the soup has cooled down, you may want to put it back on the heat and bring it back up to temperature again. And at this point, it's ready to serve. If you want this to be a full meal, then you might want to put a mound of brown rice on the bottom of the bowl in order to get a little bit more protein in there, and it's already pretty high in fiber. We've kept it fairly low in salt, but remember at this point it's a good idea to give it a small taste and see if it's seasoned correctly for you. If you want to add a little bit more salt, this would be the time to do it. In general, we're trying to get people to leave the salt shaker off the table, so it's best if the cook makes that determination, and then most people won't ask for more salt if it's not on the table. I hope you'll give this one a try. It's an excellent winter meal. It can go in the freezer, takes a little bit of time, but it can see you through some cold evenings, whether it's spring or winter or even next fall. This is North African lentil soup for Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.